Hey, how's it going, captains? Admiral Tori here, and welcome aboard for another World of Warships video on my channel. In today's video, I am going to discuss my thoughts on the world reveal from Wargaming, the carrier Rework. At the same time, I'm going to also add on to the topic the Royal Navy carriers that were teased, at least the icon, which kind of gives us an idea that soon, after the carriers are reworked, the Royal Navy carriers should be soon with us, which probably is exciting for a lot of people out there, especially me. I'm definitely excited for a new, fresh line of carriers from the Royal Navy, of course. So, I'm a little bit late, and part of that reason, aside from me being busy, is because I was following the forums, I was following the community contributors, and also I was reading through the comments in the World Reveal live stream, alongside with the separate video that Wargaming also uploaded, the 8-minute video that showed the carrier gameplay and all sorts of stuff that they have done so far. This kind of caught me by surprise because I didn't see the announcement. I think they announced it like a day before they were going to stream the CV rework video. But yeah, it really did caught me by surprise. My overall first reaction was that I was excited. Whether it was good or bad, whether, regardless of what their CV rework, my thoughts on it, I'm just glad that they were able to communicate with me. Because I was starting to feel like, carriers are just absolutely dead. It was a dead class. They said that they're going to talk about reworking it, and that's what they said a year ago. And they went silent for a long time. Of course, the super testers, the community contributors who went to the summit, I think Jingles, he did a video where I couldn't tell it was an April Fool's joke, but it was not April, so it was kind of serious, where it shows him kind of plays with the prototype. I was a little concerned, but there was just no communication. That today was the day for me to do a video after they release their stream and the videos and they discuss about the changes. I was genuinely happy. It's been a while since I was happy about World of Warships. Now, my thoughts, impression, and overall outcome from the video really depends on how people reacted to the rework. The thing about me is that regardless of what it comes out to, as long as everyone, or majority, if I put it that way, is happy about it, I'm happy about it. Even if it's something stupid about the CV rework, like CVs are now secondary battery ships. Something that's stupid and everyone agrees to go on that bandwagon, I go. I join World of Warships to have fun. And of course, it seems to me so far, looks like majority are interested. At the same time, there was a sizable group that were disappointed. I watched a few of the community contributors. Some people were happy, especially like iChase. He's been waiting for this day to come. Flamu, he said that he's optimistic, but he's not totally sold. And I'm sure there are CV community contributors or people who are sizable channels that aren't community contributors but like CVs. There's a mixed opinion. Let's start off with the obvious. They have completely changed the paradigm of carriers. It is no longer a real-time strategy game. It is now action, third-person action. I will call it TPA. Same way as saying FPS, first-person shooter, we're going to call it third-person action. This definitely angered the people who are already somewhat satisfied with the current CVs in the game because they enjoy the strategy. Why did Wargaming push forward for action over strategy? And originally, when I first played World of Warships, or when I first saw the advertisement of World of Warships, I watched a trailer called the Rock, Paper, Scissor. And it was just a cinematic trailer that you can see on your login screen if you get lucky enough to get that cutscene, where it shows planes flying into the ship, dropping torpedoes. initially I thought World of Warship was going to be an action-based game with all ship types, including carriers. I didn't think of strategy until later on when they released carriers and a different plane type. I can kind of see where it goes. Now, the argument comes in that why did Wargaming overhaul everything? They could have just, work a lot on the RTS side. Was RTS even possible in the current game? We gotta take it from the perspective of what World of Warship is really about. It's really about your ship, okay? What happens in your ship is what happens in the game. If you're close to the enemy, you're going to shoot at them. You're going to shoot your HE shells, your AP shells. On the other side of the map, you're not too concerned. Of course, you're just concerned with what's happening around you. It's all about the action. This is what the game was sold on. Carriers, on the other hand, there's the RTS action, but they're not just limited to one section of the game. They actually have a lot more control of the overall game flow. And that was a problem with carriers. Now, it is possible to make RTS work in this game. And the only way is that if both carrier players are equally proficient. And we all know that's not going to happen. That's where the skill gap problem comes in. We all know that once you find out that your friendly carrier isn't good enough to deal with the enemy carrier, it's pretty much game. Now, if we take it from the destroyer, cruiser, and battleship, the limited control, the limited influence on the overall game, if one of your battleships screws up, it doesn't mean that it's going to screw over the entire team, because it's individual's performance that adds up to the total contribution of the game. If majority of your teammates do well, then chances are you're going to win the game. If one of your battleships is just completely useless, chances are a cruiser or a destroyer or another battleship will work a little bit harder to make up for that mistake. And that was the individualism that World of Warship's trying to push, the action. You're only focused on yourself as a ship, and what you do contributes to the teamwork. Carriers, on the other hand, RTS, when it comes to RTS games, as you know, we got to talk about games that are RTS. Something like Total War. I played Total War Shogun 2 for a while. It is all about control. Controlling the map, getting information, and moving the right units. That control has a big effect on the game. And when I say control, it doesn't necessarily mean that, a carrier is able to take out a ship by itself. Or, a carrier can fly over a place and then just devastate, strike whoever ship at its own wish. The control here is the fact that you can spot a ship from the other side of the map, get information on a certain point in the map, and at the same time, take out lonely ships. And yeah, people learn. People got to learn from their mistakes. If you're out wandering by yourself, you're going to be taken out by the carrier. It's that strategy that makes carriers satisfying. And that's where the people who are unhappy about the change, the change in paradigm, they want an RTS style in the game. That's the problem. Now, here's the thing. Like I said, both carrier players have to be proficient, and at the same time, an average player in World of Warships gotta understand how carriers work. And in most cases, not everyone is educated on how to handle against an enemy carrier, which brings us to a problem. Most people aren't happy about carriers. Even if people teach them how to deal with carriers, not everyone is simply informed. It's kind of like Jingle saying that, you're selling broadside to a destroyer. What's going to happen? That's, you're selling broadside to a battleship with your own cruiser. What's going to happen? People are much more informed about that. Part of that reason is because more people play battleships, cruisers, and destroyers, but they haven't really encountered aircraft carriers enough to understand. And most of the time, they will be stubborn about it. Like, they refuse to do anything against the carrier because they already assume that they're going to lose against the carrier. So as a result, Wargaming has to take account to these type of players. They have to, as I would describe it, casualize the situation. Now, when I say casualize, it sounds bad. And sometimes I don't like the idea of, casualizing the game, making the game too easy, then it kind of takes away that competitive feel to it. But at the same time, you can't make it too complex. And carriers are complex ship types in the game. I mean, if you play carriers, yeah, you probably say, oh, it's not that hard to learn carriers. It takes time. It's just that people don't want to put the time into it. And like I said, if one player is clearly more dominant than the other, it's going to tip the scale so much due to that control, that carrier that has that control. It's going to tip the scale so much that even your team will struggle to make up for that mistake, which is why a lot of people see that if you are a dominant carrier player, you're going to have a high win rate. And it's always a one-on-one situation. There is counterplay in this type of current model, just with some tweaking what a lot of the already established CV players can think of. It's just that not many people are willing to learn it that way. It's too complex, if I put that. It's not it's not complex, but people just don't have the will to educate themselves to dealing with it. They have to find something that's more intuitive, if I put it that way, more straightforward. So we are going to third-person action, where instead of you controlling multiple squadron, you're only going to control the squadron. And your action depends on how you control that squadron, taking away a lot of the control. Now, that sounds like a big nerf, and it is a nerf. It definitely nerfs the overall carrier, but there's always a catch. Not only that they are reworking the carriers, they're also reworking the anti-air. Because as we know it, anti-air is the biggest factor against carriers, and they're trying to build this middle ground. That was the thing that was lacking about carriers. They either overperform or they underperform. There is no average middle ground. You rarely find a middle ground. The only time you get a middle ground in the current model is if both players are equally skilled. It's as simple as that. But like I said, that's not going to happen in the real world. Ideally, you want it to happen, but that won't be the case. So, unfortunately for the people who are for RTS, it is no longer going to be the case because, like I said, the game is already established on the idea that it is individual ships' performance that will contribute to the overall result of the game. While in RTS, due to its own nature, in most RTS games that I've seen, it's usually one-on-one. And if you're in a one-on-one situation and you know for the fact that the opponent is better than you, usually in this RTS games, people just accept their defeat right away. But people refuse in World of Warships over the one player to accept their defeat. It's not fair. It's unfair to the majority. And that's where Wargaming came up with the idea that they need to reduce the carrier's control in the game. You can't stick the game type that doesn't flow with the overall game. And I can understand that. Now, personally for me, I had so many moments where I really like the RTS. It offers a different experience from all the other ships. I get sick of, shooting, dropping torpedoes. Sometimes I feel like playing carriers, but I am willing to compromise. I'm willing to sacrifice that RTS just to enjoy the game. As I said, I play World of Warships to have fun. And if people don't have fun with me, what's the point in having fun? It's kind of like those games where the referee calls you out on fouls that you know for a fact that you didn't foul. And yet the enemy team, the opponent, fouls, but yet the referee doesn't call out on it. He's making the rules. It's the same way as carriers. Carriers are kind of making the rules in most of the games. The control factor. They can permanently spot, they can get so much information, and that information is also crucial to the overall flow of the game, but at the same time, it puts this negative fear on the team that has to deal with this dominant carrier player. It can only be balanced with the other carrier player. That's the problem. That's why we have the skill gap. So, they're going to reduce that control. At the same time, they're also going to reduce the AA. They're going to have to rework the AA. Here's the thing about RTS games. The outcome, like I said, this is not individual. It's not the idea about individualism in RTS doesn't really exist. It's all about strategy, how you can use your unit, the sacrifices, your understanding of what you're dealing with. As a result, the outcome is usually discrete. And when I say discrete, it's either good or bad. There's no in between. For instance, fighter on fighter, it's all determined by RNG. Your torpedo bombers and your dive bombers against the warship that you're targeting. The AA is pretty much RNG. I've seen AA where it just rips all my planes apart. Same ship, all of a sudden, barely any planes got ripped apart. RNG. Wargaming is trying to remove that. With the RTS style, you have you're sending things out there at a cost, and they don't like that idea anymore. So now that you're piloting the squadron, now you as a player will determine the outcome. As in, if you play poorly, you're gonna get poor result. If you play well, you're gonna get good to decent result, or phenomenal result. That's what Wargaming wants to push with carriers. While currently, when I say discrete, Wusta, for example, carrier against a Wusta, clearly it's like, playing an RTS game. You know that your unit, your current soldier unit, your current vehicle unit is going to be outmatched, and you're just gonna avoid it because you already know the outcome. It's discrete. You already know there's no chance you're not gonna take that opportunity. Or CV versus the Mutsu. You already know the outcome. The Mutsu has absolutely garbage AA. You're going to target the Mutsu because you know the outcome if you play it correctly. Of course, there's some skill, okay? Yeah, you got to know how to make your unit and click on it and attack, but there's no in between. You already know the outcome. That's the problem with CVs, is this RNG and the assumption that you already know the outcome. Now, what Wargaming is going to do is going to squeeze that out. It's going to squeeze that factor into a more reasonable range where, although you're facing the Wusta with the AA rework, it has strong AA, is not as strong as before, but you, as the player playing the planes, going to have to do it quick, if I put it that way, giving you a chance to do something against the Wusta. While in the case of the Mutsu, you're not totally too powerful to deal with the Mutsu. Mutsu has a chance to beat your planes, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that you can underestimate the Mutsu and just assume that, oh, Mutsu, crappy AA, I can just go in and take him out. Wargaming wants to add more factors, more variables, and in order to do that, you are now focusing on the one squadron. How you approach the target, how you are going to attack a target, what kind of weapons you're going to use. They're trying to add more variables. They're trying to get rid of the formula. The formula with the current CV is that you spot a lonely target that isn't superly strong AA, you're going to pick that target out. And yes, you're going to punish it. But the punishment in RTS it's like I said, the punishment is very strong in RTS. Okay? The one player who's not doing well in the CV, it's not fair for the others to lose the game because of that fact. I mean, yeah, a destroyer makes a mistake, then the other player can make up for it, but in the CV, it's almost kind of like you gotta need the entire team to work together and make up for the CV when you're going against somebody who is exceptionally a good player. So, we're going to dumb down that fact. Now, this also increases the pace of the game. Because before, in the current model, you do your run, you fly back. You do your run, you fly back. It's like 4 to 5 runs per game on average. In this new model, you notice that although they dumb down the damage, you're now more engaged, as in more action, because like I said, they were trying to push the third person action where you can consistently attack. They also reducing the raw damage and push forward the damage over time. And I like that idea. I like the idea that you can, you can constantly attack, keeping you always active on the battlefield. Now, yeah, it's kind of suck that you won't be able to devastate a battleship anymore. You're not going to get the devastating strike medal that often. Maybe against a destroyer or get lucky against a cruiser, but that is going to be taken away. But it's all part of the balance that Wargaming wants to go, because you can say that 150,000 damage in a carrier, 150,000 damage in the battleship, but yet people are unhappy when they get killed by a carrier. Part of the reason is because they just get wiped out, or they don't get wiped out at all. Discrete outcomes, again, like I said, you either get it or you don't get it. Nothing in between. While on the battleships, it's in between. Sometimes you do 20,000 damage on this guy, you change target, 10,000 down. You distribute the damage. So the people on the receiving end feel fair about it, while carriers don't feel fair about it, because when someone's on the receiving end of the carrier, you're just completely dead. And part of that reason is because of the slow pace in the game. You only have a limited of 5 to 6 runs per game. Now, from the new reveal gameplay, it looks like you're going to be doing quite a lot of work, as in fun work, not boring work, and you're more engaged in that work. It looks like more like 20 to 40 runs. And the reason why is because they dumb down the raw damage and they push forward the damage over time, so flooding and fire, which is also a concern that a lot of people were talking about. It's like, what happens if CV sets a flood and flies away, waits for you to damage control, and then flood you again? Now, my argument to that is that, yes, they're just trying to prove the concept, so don't overthink it. I know a lot of people like to just assume that something work in progress is final product, but very simple way for me to see it is that one, that they just scaled these type of damages, make something like minor flooding, minor fire. So a full fire, as in the game right now, is like 50 seconds, right? What happens you make it into a minor fire where it only lasts for 15 or 10 seconds? And if the CV player goes for a total of 4 tries on a ship, that'll add up 40 seconds, which is kind of like almost a full fire, right? Same thing goes with the torpedoes. Make it minor flooding. Or make it more difficult, where if you didn't know, in the Japanese carriers, their torpedoes won't cause flooding to the belt of the ship. So if your Japanese carrier hits the belt of the torpedo belt of the ship, it won't cause flooding. So in order to get a flooding going on the enemy ship, you have to hit the bow or stern. But that's kind of difficult to do so. So there is that risk and reward. You can go with the safe route by using your planes to hit the belt and just get the raw alpha damage, or you can go for the big reward by trying to hit the stern or bow, which is much more difficult if the player is making an attempt to maneuver. So yeah, I'm looking at that. So stacking the damage over time. Set one fire, only 10 seconds. Set another fire, another 10 seconds. Set another fire, another 10 seconds. Set another fire, another 10 seconds. A total of 40 seconds. And that's the entire usage of the squadron. Now, people were already assumed that. I find it really funny when I was reading the comments. They saw that, wow, this can be really broken because they got 4 tries to do this. Well, most of the clips, I hope you guys know this, the bots, they don't have their AA turned on. They were only showing how it will play out, as in how they will attack. So obviously the best result will be all 4 runs, and the only reason why that guy was able to get 4 runs was because the bots, they're bots. Okay? They had like a few clips where the AA was turned on, like the Yamato, and one scene was like half of the squadron was wiped out. It was pretty cool. It was definitely cool, and that kind of gives it more realistic, but still they're bots. Now, destroyer players were very concerned about this, but let me ask you this from the clip. Do you play like that as they show in the reveal clip, where you sail straight on to the planes? Do you sail straight in a straight line where it's predictable? Yeah, that's why it looks pretty devastating with those rockets. It's probably because they're bots. If you don't make an effort to maneuver, same thing as you don't make an effort to conceal your broadside, you're going to get punished for that fact. So don't let the gameplay fool you. You gotta take a moment to think what they're trying to do, and they're just displaying the concept. And I do really like the concept so far. I like the idea, and it looks like a lot of people in the comment section were interested. They were genuinely interested. This looks fun. I might want to start playing CVs. That's what I've been seeing in the comment section, and that puts a big smile on my face. Now, going back to the dumbing down the power of the CV, at the same time, they're dumbing down the AA power so we can build that middle ground. There is no longer the discrete outcome. There is no longer extremely well or extremely garbage. Now, there is actually variables where you can be doing well, you can do really garbage, but also you can do average. And when I saw that third person action, like the long range AA showing the flags, you have to avoid them. If you don't make an effort to avoid them, then you're gonna lose half your squadron. And the mid range and close range AA is guaranteed to do damage over time, meaning that there's going to be casualties for sure on your squadron, which means that you can't just permanently fly around and try to get a perfect run. You have to commit it. You have to plan for your run. I like that idea. It adds more variable because, like I said, it's pushing less of the strategy and more towards the player's ability. And also limiting the carrier's strength and limiting the AA strength. Now, as a result, this is the big one that I really like about this idea. The reason why I think third person action might be able to work is that it might sound bad at first, and it's at least because we're so used to the current model, but this will allow us to put more carriers in the game. I'm looking realistically at 3 to 4 carriers per team, which sounds really bad in the current model because of how powerful they are. The control, right? The control factor. But if you take a moment to think, if they were to use third person action model, only able to control one squadron, it's basically 2 carriers in that model is equal to 1 carrier in our current game. Because in our current game, we can control multiple squadrons, but we're kind of splitting it. We're partitioning the control to multiple players, which brings me back to that point. If one destroyed player is not doing so well, someone else will cover for that person. In the case of the new model, if one carrier doesn't do so well, don't worry. Maybe another carrier player can cover for that poor performance from that particular carrier. At the same time, it's more doable for the other classes of ships, the type of ship, because remember, this pretty much overall nerfs the carrier at the same time. Now, I'm assuming that they're going to adjust the damage. They're going to fine-tune it correctly. Fine-tune the rewards. Make it more fair. And now we have, ideally, a solid foundation for carriers. Now, am I saying that this is a perfect idea? Is this going to be well executed? Well, I gotta have to let time do for my work here. I can't conclude until I get my hands onto one, and I don't think I will be able to get my hands on it during the public test. I will do it during the when it's live on the server, but I can only hope that this will go out well. And I'm sure the disgruntled carrier players who already like the system, and I think part of the reason people who already like the system is because they enjoy that dominance as a carrier player. It's unfortunate, but times has changed. You're right. You will be right. The only chance that these players are right is if when it goes live, this new model goes live, and for whatever reason, there's way less carrier players than before, then you're right. That is the only reason why that this wouldn't work. But from what I've seen, it looks like majority of people really like this new idea and they find it more pleasing than the current model, the current RTS model. So, to be reasonable, if majority likes this, then it's worth the cost to lose the minority. And I've seen people saying that, well, about premium ship, I grinded to tier 10 carriers or tier 9, tier 8. What is Wargaming going to do? I hope, if I was Wargaming, I hope that Wargaming does give those players full refunds. At the same time, give those players a week to a month to make a decision that they want to keep the carriers because they like the new gameplay, because they kind of underestimated it from what they see, or make them sign or like check the box, something like accept the terms that their carriers will be removed from their account, all of the carriers that they unlock, and all of it is going to be converted into free XP. At the same time, they're going to compensate with the credits, and that's very big. But remember, Wargaming, you kind of put off on the carrier rework for a while, so it's going to cost you quite a bit, and this is the most ambitious project to this day from Wargaming. So don't expect yourself to walk out unscathed. if I put it that way. Or, the compensation, you have to fairly compensate for those people who've been playing carries for this long, because this is an issue that should have been solved within the year of its initial release. Should have been solved. You let it slide for this long. At the same time, you release premium ships. Weapon wise, I'm sure that we saw a lot of cool weapons. I like the new manual. It's not really manual no more, but I like the new attack, the attack mechanic. If you attack too early with your torpedo bombers, you're gonna get widespread. If you position your torpedo bombers correctly and fly correctly within a certain time limit, because there's a time limit on it. Once you commit to the attack, you have to commit to it. And I believe, even though it didn't show any gameplay of when the player doesn't drop his torpedoes, once the time limit is up, I believe the torpedoes will automatically drop. So in the case of a destroyer versus the squadron, if the carrier player messes up on his positioning and he's already in the attack formation, by the time limit, it will automatically drop the torpedoes wherever the planes are at, which forces the carrier player, to be penalized. There should be a penalty. And in that situation, usually happens, what in my mind right now is that the enemy destroyer was well skilled to actually maneuver enough to cause the enemy carrier player to constantly maneuver and run out of time with his planes. Or if the carrier player plays poorly, he activates it too late and the destroyer happens to sail right past the planes, and the planes have to make a U-turn. By the time it makes a U-turn, that's way too much time loss, and as a result, time's run out. Your bombers are forced to drop the torpedoes and fly back to the carrier, leaving you with one less try, right? Dive bomber wise, that was the one I've been waiting for a long time. I wanted a manual drop that the longer you hold that position, the drop zone should be shrink to reduce the RNG, because you should be rewarded for being a well-skilled carrier player for predicting your target. And if you constantly spam it, of course, it's not going to work, right? So I really do like that new concept, and that was what I really envisioned a year or two from that day into now, right? So that is cool. I was hoping that they would show more gameplay as in the Japanese carriers, because most of it was exclusively the Americans with their rockets. That was cool also. A lot of people were concerned about how many fires were set, but like I said, I talked about the damage model earlier, that they should make the damage stackable. Not just like, oh, set 2 fires and it's automatically 50 seconds. That would definitely be broken, and battleship players would not appreciate it. At the same time, destroyer players don't appreciate it. So now we have no longer devastating strike. At the same time, no longer no results, right? No more discrete outcome. You have a lot more tries, 20 to 40 runs versus 4 to 5 runs to make an impact in the game. We divided the power of carriers, and now multiple players, assuming that they will change the matchmaking since they nerfed the carriers, they will be able to push more carriers per match to make up for the other carrier player who has failed to do his job, right? Now, it's not to say when I say nerf, I know it sounds weird, but when I say nerf, it doesn't mean that, oh, carrier's damage overall is dropped dramatically. I say nerf in terms of the control that carriers have due to the RTS nature. I'm sure, from what I've seen, if done correctly, if they tweak the numbers, they tweak the damage, they will be able to pull some amazing games like 200,000 damage if the carrier player is smart enough and lands all his hit. But if the carrier player rushes his attack, misses the first run, the performance of a player will always be determined by the numbers of errors that they make. The more errors you make, the lower chance of doing well. The player that does the best is the one that makes the least amount of error. The team that wins is the one that makes the least errors, not the team that is good. Any team can be good, but if the team continually make errors, the better team will be the one that makes the least amount of mistakes. That is something I learned from League of Legends, and it's true. It has always been true, and from what I've seen so far, it's going to be hard to disprove that truth from that statement. So in the case of having maximum 40 runs, 40 tries, the mini runs, right, is much smaller than the current model. The more you mess up because you rush, you think that you have so much opportunity. As time runs out, you kind of wish that you take your time to think about how you execute those runs. And again, it focuses on the individual's player's ability to play those squadrons correctly. Things to nitpick, I didn't like the dive bomber animation is kind of inaccurate. They weren't high enough. That's just nitpicking. That doesn't take away the overall concept, which is why I'm going to talk about that last in this video. Deplaning. Here's another big topic. No longer reserves. That sounds broken, but this was the #1 problem with carrier design. Look at Graf Zeppelin. Wargaming has to work with Graf Zeppelin, as in, although her historical reserve was like 40, they had to stick 60 or 70, I don't know, whatever number, just to make her a tier 8 carrier. People propose that she should be a tier 6 carrier because of her reserve, but the ship, like legitly, the ship is too big to be a tier 6 carrier, so they had to make fictional numbers or improvise as saying that, it's 40 carriers in reserve, but you can put planes on the flight deck and put 40 down below, whatever the case is. Yeah, obviously people didn't like that fact when she was released. Saipan, here's another example. If they kept with the RTS style. Saipan, they couldn't put her at tier 6 because her hangar reserve is bigger than the Independence. Pay to win. But when they put it at tier 7, she doesn't have a big enough hangar to compete against the Hiryu or the Ranger. What did they do? They stuck tier 9 planes on the Saipan. If you don't have quantity, you have quality. And it's a pain in the ass to deal with a Saipan. I mean, with two equally skilled CV players, I'm sure that the other CV player who's going against the Saipan can figure out a way. I figured out a way with my tier 6 planes on the Kaga with my own advantages, but not everyone is going to figure that out way. And of course, ultimately, like I said, not everyone is an average CV player. You're going to have to consider the overall population. One more example of why Wargaming decided that it was the best of the interest for carriers to remove this explicit reserve number, the Midway. As you know it, the Midway used to have a massive reserve. It's like 146 planes, I believe, and at one point she also had tier 10 planes. Now, if you take it from the previous example with Saipan, you have a smaller hangar, but you have better planes, the quality. In the case of Midway, she has the quantity versus the Hakuryu, which means that what Wargaming did was that they nerfed the tiers on the plane. You don't have tier 10 torpedo bombers on the Midway, now you have tier 8. The fighters were nerfed to tier 9 because the Americans had way better strafing than the Japanese because, well, they're Bearcats. What do you expect? Those guys are ripping the Japanese planes off the skies. The only tier 10 planes that they have was the dive bombers. That was it. And that was still not enough for them, so they decided to add one more fighter squadron to the Hakuryu and then minus 20 planes from the Midway reserve, which pissed off a lot of people. But you get my point. The reserve was a major influence to the carriers in the game. So Wargaming took it out, and the best design that they can think of was to put an implicit reserve. Although technically you have unlimited planes, there is a cooldown to how many planes you can use. If you waste all your planes within the first 5 minutes, you're going to be waiting for your planes to respawn. That was the idea. Now, it is unlimited planes, but how many planes can you get out in 20 minutes? That is the better question. So technically, there is some sort of reserve. It's just that if you blow your planes, you kind of wish that you didn't blow your planes, because what happens in a situation where there's a destroyer and he's the last destroyer alive and you're about to lose the game because the enemy team has most of the objective, but yet your team has most of their ships alive. You kind of wish you had planes, didn't you, right? So you gotta play very cautiously. Which brings me to the fun topic, the final topic that relates to the deplaning and the reserves being removed. The Royal Navy carriers. The ultimate example for why they removed the reserves. If they didn't remove the reserves, then the Royal Navy carriers would have planes at their tier that will be clearly better quality than the Japanese and the Americans. And the reason I say that is because the Royal Navy, if you take a moment to actually research some Royal Navy carriers, well, I did when I was playing carriers back in the day, their reserves are a lot smaller than the Japanese and the Americans, which means that they got to follow the Saipan design, where they get quality planes. But obviously that dealing with Saipan was not fun, especially with the current mechanics in the game, or they have to play around with the stats, right? Like the Graf Zeppelin. So it's going to be very hard to implement future carriers, meaning that there's not much content for carriers. So the choice to remove reserves, I think that was a wise choice. I might be wrong, but it was a wise choice. So if you look at Royal Navy carriers, I think on average they have like 50 planes at max. And the reason why is because the Japanese and Americans emphasize large carrier groups, while the Royal Navy didn't emphasize that as much, especially when you compare the Pacific to Atlantic warfare when it comes to carrier fights. I mean, the Germans didn't really release a full carrier. They were like 95% done with the Graf Zeppelin, but I don't think they have a chance against the Royal Navy's carrier because the Royal Navy had a lot more carriers than the Germans anyways to begin with. But land-based air battles, that's a whole different story, of course, right? So yeah, Royal Navy carriers, I'm excited for them. If they didn't do this, how would they implement Royal Navy carriers? Would you go with the quality planes, make it very strong compared to the American counterparts and the Japanese? Or would you just stuck in 20 extra planes out of nowhere and make it make believe Royal Navy carriers that, oh, we just happen to have extra planes on deck that we never took advantage, historically speaking? At the end of the day, it's a game. I don't care whatever happens to it. If my Royal Navy carrier has 20 extra planes, but it's fun to play and reasonably balanced, I'll do it. So my final words on the rework. I liked it. I really do liked it. Although there's a special place in my heart that all the memories I had with the extreme moments, the crazy moments I had with the Lexington, they outplays the RTS style. I originally thought that the rework was going to be RTS, but for the greater good of this game, if the investment into third-person action was successful, as in more players are playing carriers, they put more carriers in the game, and maybe possibly put lift the limits on the division amount of carriers. It'd be fun to play with your friends, and then you can do cross drops, right? They changed the AA to make it more fair, but at the same time, remember, carriers are somewhat losing control in terms of their ability to control the map, the macroscopic environment of RTS style to more microscopic, more focused on the player's ability to use the weapons on a plane. I think that is promising fun. I'm sure you guys might be disappointed, but it won't be bad of a disappointment if Wargaming made a compensation. But I'm here for fun. I want to play the USS Enterprise. I want to play Kaga. I want to play HMS Implacable, if I pronounce it correctly. I'm sure that's how you pronounce it. HMS Argus, the Graf Zeppelin. There's a aircraft carrier that starts with an A. I think is Italian. You get my point. I came to World of Warships to play with historically World War II ships in terms of the models, right? You know, historically speaking, they don't really perform that way. I mean, then all the American battleships have radar, right? Once at tier A and above, or this and that. You know, I'm for the game. That's my point. If it's fun, it works. Everyone's happy ultimately, right? It's just because you're having fun with carriers, which in this case, people who are dominant carrier players, they're having fun. It doesn't mean that it's fair to jeopardize everyone else's enjoyment. It defeats the purpose. If you're gonna make the rules of the game, nobody's gonna play with you. People think you're a prick, right? That's the point. So I have full faith in I want to say it's going to be out in, optimistically, 2 months, okay? If they do everything right. But safely, 5 months, or at least next year. It doesn't look like it's going to be coming out anytime soon in a few patches, but I did hear that Jingles was predicting that he might be able to get his hands on the new carrier rework as soon as this month or early next month, which is kind of scary because, like I said, I want them to do a good job with it. But at the same time, I'm excited. I'm definitely excited for the action. I came here to get blown away by the flak guns or drop torpedoes. I'm excited. I'm all for balance. You know, if you can take my most favorite ship and if for whatever reason was unbalanced, nerf it. Because there's no point of playing a ship if nobody enjoys me being around with a abusive ship, right? Do it. Do the right thing. And in this case, reworking the carriers, it's almost mission accomplished, but not there because it's not in the game yet. But once that day comes, I will make a video about that. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time on World of Warships.